have an official debate. We have Mr. Batman here. We have Deonteleologist. For the debate, Mr. Batman's taking the affirmative that God exists. Deonteleologist taking the opposition. As always, when we based upon who concedes, no concessions made. We'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can vote on who you think performed better overall in the debate. No time limit. You guys can get started.
Okay. Did you want to do an intro, sir?
No, I think you could go for it.
Okay. Well, I am Mr. Batman. I'm what's called a Torah observant Christian. I'm a destroyer of false worldviews and proclaimer of the Messiah. I'm also a teacher of science. I love science because you cannot do science without the God of the Bible. Now, my entire premise is going to be that everything declares the handiwork of the Creator. All time, space, matter, and everything that dictates how time, space, and matter works. So, my first question would be to you, the person who says there is no God, is where did everything come from? Time, space, and matter. The question being applied here is that for the fact that we know that time, space, and matter had a beginning. Because something has a beginning, it's called an effect. Every effect must have an adequate cause. The adequate cause of time, space, and matter must be, by definition, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all powerful, all knowing, a loving, living, logical, lawgiver God, Elohim. And you know what? I can prove each and every one of those points scientifically. That's my opening.
I'd love to see it.
All right. So, where does time, space, and matter come from, sir?
I'm agnostic about that.
So, is there anything that you do know?
There are things that I would feel comfortable saying that I know. Whether I know them for absolute fact, um, I suppose the only things that I know for absolute fact would be things that are true by definition because of the way that we define certain terms.
Okay, sir. In order to define certain terms, one of the things that's an absolute necessary precondition for a definition would be the law of identity. So you could identify what it is you are trying to actually define. So, where does that law of logic come from? The law of identity, which happens to be eternal, universal, and unchanging.
I'm agnostic about where it comes from. I don't know that it needs to
What does that
come
mean?
from anywhere. It means I don't know whether it
Great.
came from anywhere or whether it needs to have come from anywhere.
Okay, let me ask you another question, sir. Would you agree that in the beginning of the universe, since the universe did have a beginning, in the beginning of the universe, that the universe could not have both existed and not existed at the same time in the same way?
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the law of non-contradiction.
Okay, great. Is that a yes? Because you're using words that are not very clear.
I think I said yes.
Great. I prefer yes and no answers. Again, I'm just simple like that. I'm an elementary school teacher, so I like simple words. So, since we know that the law of non contradiction must have existed in the very beginning, since the universe could not have both existed and not existed at the very beginning of time. So, that means the law of non contradiction, along with the law of identity, is eternal, universal, and unchanging. Since we see that as an effect in the physical world, what causes that effect?
What do you mean we see it as an effect in the physical world?
Well, if I was to say to you, my car is and is not in the parking lot right now, is that statement true?
No.
Great. So we see the law of non contradiction and the law of identity at work in our physical world. And it's
We
always going to be the case that if you have a contradiction, it's going to be false. So, since that's always the case and it's eternal, universal, and unchanging, where do those laws come from and why do they not change over time?
I don't know where they come from. Probably I would say that they're the sort of things that are analytic truths. They're true by definition. Or not even analytic truths, they're logical truths. More basic.
Uh, I'm sorry, sir. Yes, it is logically true that the law of non contradiction and the law of identity and the law of excluded middle exist, and they are necessary preconditions of the functionality of our physical world. That's not a question here. The question is, since we see them at work in our physical world, and everything in our physical world works under the law of cause and effect, another one of these pesky laws that do not change over time. Let me just ask you a quick question, sir. Can you tell me where any natural law comes from and why they don't change over time? Laws of gravity, magnetism, thermodynamics, mathematics, logic, physics. I could go on and on and on, sir. Where do any of these laws come from, and why do they not change over time?
Have an answer to that question?
There's not much of a debate now, is it?
Well, I mean, you're trying to convince me that God exists. You haven't gotten
Yes.
me anywhere close to that.
Okay. Again, sir, time, space, and matter requires an eternal, universal, and unchanging God. Because again,
Well,
it says in
wait,
Psalm
that's a
119,
big premise. Let's try to hear some justification for that.
sure. Again, sir, time, space, and matter had a beginning. Do you agree with that?
Time, space, and matter had a beginning. I'm not sure. It's plausible.
Are you familiar with the second law of thermodynamics?
Um, Probably not. If you said it, I might remember it.
The second law of thermodynamics is also known as entropy, that everything decays over time. Everything goes from a state of order to disorder, from workable usable energy to no workable usable energy. We also call this thermal equilibrium. Are you familiar with it now?
Yeah, I'm familiar with entropy.
Great. This also proves that the universe could not have been here forever. It did have a beginning. Because if the universe had been here for an infinite amount of time in the past, then there would be no temperature differences between things. Would you agree, sir, that that big shiny yellow ball in the center of our solar system is a greater temperature than where we are right now here on this earth?
Yeah, that seems right.
That proves right there, sir, that both that shiny yellow ball and this Earth could not have been here an infinite amount of time because there would be no temperature difference between the two. Let me give you an elementary example. If you take a cup of hot steaming coffee and you put that hot steaming coffee in the middle of your coffee table and you walk away for 2 hours, what happens to the temperature of the coffee?
It drops and then stays pretty stable.
It actually decreases. And the longer it's in the room, the closer to thermal equilibrium they become. That is, there's no difference between the room temperature and the coffee temperature. That's called thermal equilibrium. We see huge temperature differences throughout our solar system, throughout our galaxy, throughout our universe. So that proves that the universe could not have been here an infinite amount of time in the past. So that means it had a beginning. What caused it to begin, sir? Here's where you
What
probably
caused
say,
it
I
to
don't know
begin?
again. Yeah, that would be a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all powerful, all knowing, loving, living, logical lawgiver God. Now, would you agree, sir, that whatever caused time, space, and matter to begin, that thing or being that caused time, space, and matter to begin, it did not need time, space, and matter in order to create time, space, and matter?
I don't know how that's supposed to work.
Once again, sir, is there anything that you do know?
I told you what I am most comfortable asserting that I know. It's what I'm sort of a contextualist when it comes to epistemology. The degree of certainty that I have when affirming any of my beliefs is going to depend on the context.
How do you identify the context or the certainty or the belief without the law of identity? And wouldn't you agree that that law of identity must pre-exist any of those positions?
Sure, yeah,
Great.
that's fine.
So, where does the law of identity come from without an eternal, universal, and unchanging lawgiver God? His name is Elohim, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yeshua, Yehoshua. You might know him by his Greek name, Jesus.
I don't know why I should believe that it needs to have an origin outside of itself.
I thought we
The
just
law of
talked about that,
identity.
sir. The second law of
No, you
thermodynamics tells us everything decays over time. Now, since everything in the physical world decays over time, the laws that do not change over time cannot come from the physical world since everything in the physical world does change over time. Do you see the problem there?
I don't see the problem. I see the fact that logical laws are not physical entities.
That's quite correct, sir. That's why they're called metaphysical laws. That's my whole point. They must come from outside of the physical world, but they dictate how the physical world works. Let me ask you a question, sir. Can you make a round triangle or a square circle or a married bachelor or maybe even military intelligence? You see, those things violate the law of identity. They do not exist in the real world.
I wouldn't say that they violate the law of identity. I think they violate a certain construal of the law of non-contradiction.
Okay, sir. So where does the law of non-contradiction come from, and why does it not change?
Again, I don't see why it needs to come from anywhere.
Because everything in our physical world works by
It's
it.
not a it's not a physical object though.
I'm sorry, sir. I actually pointed out to you that the car cannot both be in the parking lot and not in the parking lot simultaneously. So, would you agree, sir, that we observe the law of non contradiction at work in the physical world?
It's a strange way to put it. We don't actually observe the law at work. We observe, or we our empirical experience of the world, we can only really make rational sense of by presupposing the law of non-contradiction.
I'm sorry, sir. Your presupposition does not explain its existence. You see, the laws of
I
logic
didn't.
are not self-existent. They're not self-explanatory, and they sure don't tell you where time, space, and matter comes from. So once again, we're still left at trying to answer the question: how can it be that in the physical world, the car cannot both be in the parking lot and not in the parking lot simultaneously? We have to have the law of identity. We have to have the law of non-contradiction, and we have to have laws of physics, because in order for you to presuppose these laws, you have to have the law of identity so you can identify what it is you're trying to presuppose.
You just haven't given me any reason to think that that logical laws need to have some sort of origin outside of themselves.
I'm sorry, sir. So are you saying that the laws of logic are self-existent and self-explanatory?
Um, I'm not necessarily saying that, but I don't
I'm sorry, I think
immediately
that's
see an
exactly what you
objection to
said.
it.
I
I don't
think that's
immediately
exactly
see an
what you said.
objection to that.
Do you have an argument that's a little less circular?
I mean, I'm not the one making any positive claims yet. I'm waiting for you to give me a good reason to believe in God.
Hmm. Are you familiar with the word beroshit? It's the word we translate from the Hebrew. We translate that into "in the beginning." And that very word alone dictates and proves that there is a loving, living, logical lawgiver God who came from his tent. That's where we get the word Beit, Resh, and Aleph. That is where we get the word bara. Bara is the Son of God. And we know that in the beginning, God created. That's what the very first words of the Bible say. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is why I asked you where time, space, and matter comes from. In the beginning, that's time. God, the agent behind the creation, created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter. That's all time, space, and matter created in the first verse of the Bible. You see, sir, I have a justification for every claim that I make. And yet, the only thing you seem to be able to say is, I don't know, or I'm agnostic about that. Once again, sir, what caused all time, space, and matter to begin, since I have very thoroughly explained to you why time, space, and matter did have a beginning?
Well, I just want to appreciate the fact that you told me that a certain word proves the existence of an all-knowing, all-loving, logical, blah 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 blah. Um,
Everything
my
does.
my response to your point here is that I can't make coherent sense of the idea that there was an act of creation that preceded time, because creation itself is a temporal process.
Okay, sir. Actually, there's two types of time. There's temporal time, that's where we live, and there's eternal time, where the God of creation lives. Now, again, we know that all time, space,
That's
and
very ad
matter,
hoc.
actually, sir, it's actually very descriptive, because when we look at time, space, and matter, we know that physicists do not call it time and they don't call it space. They call it space time. Why? Because it's called a continuum. You cannot have one without the other. Did I mention I'm a science teacher? So, once again, when we're looking at these things, we have to have an explanation for why they exist and why they work the way they do. See, this is what science wants to do. Science wants to explain how things work, why they work the way they do, and what they are contingent upon. Now, in order for you to be able to say that, well, wait a minute, there is no God, then in order for you to make that claim, which is a positive claim, by the way, I would like for you to explain to me where time, space, matter, laws of logic, laws of physics come from so time, space, and matter can function the way it does. And oh, by the way, not only do you have to explain where they come from, then you have to also explain why they don't change over time in a universe that's constantly changing over time. And number three, you have to explain why these laws and these situations are going to be here again tomorrow so we can enjoy this party one more time.
I don't understand how you claim to be embodying a scientific worldview when you're so dogmatically certain about these things. The scientific worldview is predicated upon skepticism and
No, sir.
the willingness to suspend judgment when certainty is not attainable. And
Actually, certainty is attainable.
that I think there's no question that the problem of the origin of the universe is by no means one which we are warranted to be dogmatically certain about.
I'm sorry, sir. You don't know that, do you?
Of course not. Of course, I don't know that.
Hmm. Well, since you don't know, how do you know that I'm wrong? You don't. See, that's a
I'm not
problem.
saying that I know it. I mean, I heard
Good.
you earlier
Well, let
say
me
that
go ahead and
knowledge
explain
is
something to you real
justified
quick,
true
sir.
belief.
Let me go ahead and explain
Go
something
ahead.
to you real quick. We're gonna talk about something called again Beroshit, Beit Resh Aleph Shin Yud Tav. Beit is again the picture of a house. Well, who's in the house? Well, the Resh is. The Resh is the prince. The prince of who? The prince of Aleph is the God of creation. So you've got the Son of God in the house who's going to come and do the Sheen, which is going to crush and destroy using the Yud, his hand, his mighty hand, and he's going to perform a mighty work. That's the cross. That's the Tav. Again, sir, God created so you could know him. You know things to be true. Sir, would you agree that one finger plus one more finger is always and only two fingers?
Yeah,
Great. How do you know that to be true?
by the definitions of one, two fingers and addition.
Great, sir. But could you be wrong?
About that, I don't think so.
I didn't ask you if you think, sir. I'm pretty sure that you're trying to think right now. Could you be wrong? It's a yes or no answer question. It's called a dichotomy if you'd like to look that up. I'm
Oh
not
man.
laughing, sir.
Uh, I know you're not laughing. I'm laughing, you fucking idiot. No. I'm gonna say no. I could not be wrong.
Great. So, in order for that statement to be true, one of two statements has to be true. Because if you can't be wrong about it, then either one of two statements must be true. Either A, you have to know all things, and it's very clear that you don't, or B, you
To
have to have a
know all
relationship.
things?
Yes, you'd have to know all things. Because if you could be wrong, then you don't know it. If I was to say, sir, that the road outside of my little apartment right here, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, but I could be wrong. Do I know it?
So that you made a huge leap. So
I'm asking you a
you
question, sir.
said,
If I was to say, please pay attention, this is philosophy 101, okay? You're learning something
"Oh my
today.
goodness,
Would you
oh
agree,
my
sir, that if
goodness."
I
Go
was to
ahead.
tell
No.
you that the road outside of my house here, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, but I could be wrong. Do I know it?
I mean, I think the concept of knowledge is a little bit silly and reflective of the whole arrogance of most of the Western philosophy tradition. But
Is that true?
I'll play by your definitions and say no, you don't know it.
Okay, sir, then what would be your definition of knowledge, and how do you know that?
I wouldn't define knowledge. I think it's a ridiculous task.
Hmm. That's why you don't know anything, sir. And see, this is the problem. In order to know anything to be true, it must be justifiable and it must be true. So, in order to claim knowledge, you must be able to say, yes, I know it and I could not be wrong about it. If you could be wrong about it, then you don't have knowledge. You simply have a belief. You could believe that there's pink unicorns on the dark side of the moon. I really don't care. It's not true and you can't prove it. The fact of the matter is, sir, in order for you to make the claim that one finger plus one more finger is always and only two fingers, you must either A, know all things, or something out there in the universe could prove you wrong. Or B, you must have a relationship with the God who does know all things. And that's Romans chapter 1, starting at verse 18. It says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of men, who by their wickedness suppress the truth." That's you, sir. And what truth might that be? the truth that God is. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. Namely, his eternal power, his divine nature. Hold on to this. His invisible attributes have been clearly perceived, clearly seen ever since the creation of the world in everything that has been made, so that you, sir, have no excuse. Let me ask you a question. How do you make divine invisible attributes known to your entire creation?
I don't know, earlier you were saying that that sort of thing, like a round triangle, is impossible to actually bring about.
I'm sorry, sir. I'm asking you about invisible attributes like laws of logic, laws of physics, laws of chemistry. These are invisible laws. They're not weighable, they're not touchable, they're not tasteable, but they exist because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here to complain about it. So, once again, sir, these are the invisible attributes of an eternal, universal, and unchanging lawgiver God. This is why I go down this line of questioning with you, sir. And you already know that you exist. You know that you know things, but you can't justify why you know things. You simply say, "Oh, I don't know."
That was good. That was a good goofy. Um,
Yes, I know. I'm an elementary school teacher, and they like it when I talk like this.
oh man. Um, so the point that I was referencing with the round triangles was just because you used the language of perception after saying that something was invisible. Now, if you're just talking about knowledge or apprehension, then I wouldn't have raised that. And if I misheard you, then I apologize. I'm not claiming
You
that.
did.
So I'm sorry about that. Then it'd be interesting to go back and see what you said. Um, what I'm saying is not that something invisible cannot be the object of knowledge. What I'm saying is that it couldn't be the object of perception. And I just want to return to something that you brought up and then um, sort of paraded your little snake oil party around for a few minutes after and sort of
Do you know that?
obfuscated. Uh, who
Go ahead,
who
sir.
knows? I don't. It doesn't matter. So
Really?
what you said was that if
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 it doesn't matter,
I
how do you know it doesn't matter? You see, you don't have a definition for knowledge. Would you agree, sir, that
I
knowledge is
already
a justified
told
true
you that.
belief?
No, I think Gettier
Okay, then
disproved
how
that.
do you know what knowledge is?
I didn't claim to know what knowledge is.
Do you know anything? Do you know it's wrong for you to be a pedophile, sir?
Again, I would return to epistemic contextualism. If you ask me that
I'm sorry, sir.
um,
You're using
in a
big
casual
letters, big
context,
words, multiple syllable words. Remember, if you cannot explain it to a third grader, treat me like a third grader, sir. Explain it to me as if I were a third grader. I'm doing that to you.
you use words like beroshit, and I've never heard of this before. And
Mhm.
I'm sure a third
That's why
grader
I'm a
would need
teacher,
some
sir.
explanation. A
Actually,
third
that's
grader
what
would
I'm
need
going to
some
give you
explanation.
explanation. I'm going to give you the explanation of Bereshit, sir. It's where we get
So,
the
do you
word
know what
in the
epistemic
beginning.
contextualism means? Do you know
Actually, I
what
do, sir.
epistemic
But if we're going to
contextualism? Okay,
identify epistemic continualism or whatever it is the hell you're talking about,
contextualism.
contextualism, how did you identify those two things? And do you know them?
You're just using the same tactic over and over again, which
Because
is
truth doesn't
only
change.
effective if you is only. But it's not about truth. It's about knowledge in this
Is it
context. I'm
true
not
that it's not
denying that
about truth?
there's. I'm not denying that there is objective truth.
Really? Where does that come from?
It doesn't come from anything. It's just
Then
you
how do you know
cannot
that?
because you cannot consistently deny that there is objective truth because the
You
claim
seem
there
to
is
be
no
doing that.
objective truth. No, not at all. Not at all.
Really?
Not at
Then where does
all.
objective truth come from?
It doesn't come from anywhere. It's just in
So
the
did time,
nature
space, and
of,
matter have a
oh my
beginning?
good. Hey. Can you let me get a point out, please, before you interrupt me?
I would love. Do you know that you're trying to get a point out?
God. Sure.
Great. So now you have
Can I
some
get
knowledge. Where does that knowledge come from, sir? If you're just going to claim it doesn't come from anywhere, then you believe in magic. Do you believe in magic?
not that I know of?
Do you have a keeper there? Does somebody wipes the drool off your face every now and again? Can I speak to them? Because apparently you don't know much.
Okay. I don't. Sorry. I apologize. Um
Why would you
Ca-
apologize
ca-
if there's no such thing and you don't know what morality is and you don't know why it's wrong for you to be a pedophile?
Dude, you're fucking insufferable. Can I get
I
my
know.
point out? Can I get my
No,
point out?
probably not.
Would you
Do
please
you
let
know
me
you
get
want to
my
get your
point
point
out?
out?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
now you're using manners. I appreciate that, sir. But wait a minute. If you don't know why it's wrong to be a pedophile, why would you be using manners and not be rude to me?
I would say I do know why it's wrong to be a pedophile because the
Oh, now we
contextualism
have
has kicked
knowledge
in.
again.
The
Where does that
contextualism has
knowledge come
kicked in.
from?
Where does that knowledge come from? It comes from
Mhm.
my having beliefs and they're being justified and true and non-Gettier-ized.
Oh, justified true belief. Now, in order for you to have a justified true belief, it must be provable. That's justification, and it must be
No, no, no,
true.
no.
Truth is that which.
Provable.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Provable.
sir. I'm sorry. Here we go. Provable. Justification is provable. That's what justification is, sir.
Justification and
If
truth are not equivalent. Justification
I didn't say that, sir.
and
Justification
proof, and are
justification
not
is your
equivalent.
chain of evidence that proves a
Yes.
statement, sir. Would you agree with
Okay,
that?
I was interpreting the claim proof in the deductive or mathematical sense. It's much stronger than evidence.
I'm sorry, sir. If you're going to have a chain of evidence, it's still a mathematical fact that you have to have one finger plus one more finger is always and only how many? Say it with me. Two fingers.
That is a deductively valid claim. There's a difference between mathematical beliefs, which can be proved deductively,
Hmm.
and uh, beliefs about the external world, which can only
Oh,
be justified.
mathematical claims, mathematical beliefs. Wait a minute. Are you saying that there's such things as mathematical laws like base 10,
I
laws of
don't know whether
algebra?
I don't know whether base 10 is a law. I don't know enough about mathematics, but I would say that there
Wait a
are
minute. You were appealing to
mathematical laws.
mathematics. You don't know enough about mathematics to appeal to it?
I know enough about mathematics to know that we have defined certain mathematical concepts in certain ways such that they are necessarily true.
They are true, sir. But
Certain
truth is that which
mathematical claims
comports
are
with
necessarily
reality.
true.
Would you agree with that?
I don't know whether I believe in the correspondence theory of truth because that gets into some pretty serious difficulties in terms of scientific realism and anti-realism, and there is lots of disputes about that. I probably subscribe to a deflationary theory of truth.
And what does that look like, sir?
That's the claim that to assert um, P is true is just to assert P.
How do you identify P without the law of identity, which must pre-exist P?
You don't, you don't. You assume, you presuppose the law of identity.
Oh, no, sir. Your presupposition does not explain it. It doesn't allow it to continue over time without changing, and it doesn't explain why it's going to be here tomorrow. Your presupposition is circular, sir. You have what's called vicious circularity, and your vicious circularity is showing.
So, um,
Hey, if you ever get into the Scottsburg area, you ought to stop by Java Station and get one of these. These are great. It's ice
nice,
mocha.
nice. So the most intuitively plausible justification for something like the law of identity and the law of non-contradiction that I know of comes from Aristotle. And what Aristotle says is the reason we're justified in assuming the law of non-contradiction and assuming the law of identity is because it's impossible to assert any proposition without presupposing those laws.
Not presupposing them, sir. You have to have them. Your presupposition, whether you presuppose them as positive or you don't presuppose them at all as negative, either one is irrelevant because in order to identify either position, they must pre-exist your ability to presuppose. And Aristotle did not actually create these things. He discovered them.
I didn't say he created them.
Awesome, sir. So since they pre-exist Aristotle, they pre-exist all people, and they do
Hmm.
not come from our mind. Would you agree, sir, that these laws of logic are abstractions of a mind?
I would agree that they're abstract entities. They're not concrete, material, or physical entities.
So where do these things exist? Do these abstractions exist in a mind, like your
Oh, I
mind?
don't think that you want to get into this debate with me because I have
I'm sorry,
very
sir.
strange views about
I don't
existence
care.
and
You have some very
being.
strange views already, I've already seen, but I'm asking you a question, sir. Again, do these laws of logic, do they exist as abstractions in a mind? Because here's the problem. They do. They are abstractions of a mind, and they don't change over time. So it can't come from our minds. It can't come from the mind of Aristotle or Socrates or any of those people. Why? Because your mind can change over time. That's why you know it's wrong to be a pedophile, and that statement will never change because morality doesn't change. It doesn't come from your mind because you could change your mind and be a pedophile tomorrow. That would be bad, sir. So once again, I can actually prove to you scientifically why it's always wrong to be a pervert. A pervert is any person
Scientifically, I
who
would
takes
love to
any
see a
system whatsoever.
scientific proof. I'd love to see a
A
scientific
pervert
proof of
is
this.
any person who takes any system whatsoever and uses that system in a way it was never designed to be used. The pedophile and the
Where's the
homosexual are equally perverted positions because
experiment?
they're
What's the
using the
opposite?
sexual
What's the
reproductive
control?
system. This is science, sir, Science 101.
Can you show me the hypothesis, the control? What's the control variable?
I'm sorry, sir. When we're talking about perversion, would you agree, sir, that it is a perversion of nature and nature's God? Well, you probably wouldn't say nature's God, but it is a perversion of the sexual reproductive system to do something that thwarts or destroys that sexual reproductive system. That's why we call them sexual perverts. No?
I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay. So you think it's okay to be a pedophile?
That is not what I said.
Okay. Is it wrong to be a pedophile? And is it always going to be wrong to be a pedophile?
Yes.
Great. So that's a universal moral statement. Where does that come from? Because it can't come from your mind, because you could change your mind tomorrow and be a pedophile. Don't do that, sir. That's very bad. Now, I'm going to ask you again, since we have these universal moral statements, and it's always going to be wrong for you to be a sexual pervert. And a pervert is any person who takes any system like the sexual reproductive system and uses that system in a way it was never designed to be used, which
I reject
destroys the
that premise,
functionality of the
but
system.
I reject your definition of what it is to be a pervert. But if you're asking me where I think objective morality comes from, I think it comes from the structure of rational agency. I'm a Kantian.
I could care less, sir. You're not very smart. That's what I do know. The fact of the
You
matter is you
asked
don't
me
know
where
anything.
you asked me my justification. Do you want me to go step by step through the
Where
argument?
did
You've
how did
never heard of
Kant
Kant?
identify it? How did Kant identify what is sexually immoral?
Oh, Kant was absolutely wrong about what was sexually immoral because he based it all on natural
Mhm.
function.
Oh, I thought you said you were a Kantian. Don't Kantians follow Kant?
Oh my God. Jesus fucking Christ.
I'm
No,
sorry, sir. Why do you
Kantians
take
don't.
God's name in vain? Why don't you say Santa Claus? Oh, my Santa Claus.
Oh, Santa fucking Claus. How's that?
There you go, sir.
So,
Because the reason you do that, sir, is because you know that there's a God and you're trying to insult him. You're trying to insult me by insulting him. I really could care less, sir, because you're on your way to hell, and that's why I'm here to stop that. You see, I'm
oh,
a proclaimer of the gospel of Messiah, and that gospel of Messiah is the one who came to die for your sins. Yod He Vav He. That's the 4 digits of the 4 letters of God. It's called the Tetragrammaton. And you know what, sir? That means God gives his self, his son. It says, behold the hand, behold the nail. This is in the name of the very God of creation. Jesus said, for there is no one who comes to me. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. You don't have any truth, any wisdom, or any knowledge without the Messiah. And I've made that quite evident today.
no, you have claimed it repeatedly, but you haven't given anything close to a justification for it.
How do you identify a justification without the law of identity, and where does that come from?
Oh my fucking Santa Claus. Dude,
It's been nice talking with you, sir.
are you done?
Oh, yes, sir. You've been done for about the last 10 minutes. I just been playing with you.
Okay, okay. All right. Sounds good.
Repent or perish. Repent and believe the gospel. You're on your way to hell. Have a nice day.
Fuck off.
Next.
All right. I'm presuming you guys don't want to give closing statements. You're all set.
My
I'll
closing
give a closing
statement
statement.
is
Oh, go ahead, sir.
fucking hail Satan, baby.
I love it. How he appeals to a deity, a false deity that's in the Bible. I love that. The fact of the matter is, this poor gentleman has said that he knows that the only thing he knows is he knows nothing. The fact that
I didn't
knowledge
say that.
escapes this poor person. I'm sorry, sir. Here's where you shut up. Thank you very much. Because you don't
Oh,
know
yeah,
anything.
right. Because you
So once
respected
again,
that rule
since
for
we
the entire debate.
know that
Because
he
you care
doesn't
so
know
much
anything,
about
and
me.
we know that he cannot justify his positions, we know that he does not know where time, space, and matter comes from. I have proven all these things that they must come from a living, loving, logical lawgiver God. His name is Elohim, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jesus, the only God that exists. You know what it says in Psalm 119, verse 89 through 91? It says, forever, O Lord. Forever is a long time. It means forever. Forever, O Lord, your word, your law is firmly fixed in the heavens. You have established the earth, and it holds fast to this very day, for all things are your servants. That's a lawgiver God. You don't have any reason why laws exist. You just simply think they are. And you know what, sir? That's very sad for your position. But have a nice day.
Okay, great. So, for the audience that was here for 2/3 of the debate,